Hey, DawgNation, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And boy, I tell you what, I am starting to get so excited about what's going to happen on Saturday inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Georgia-Auburn, what we're calling DawgNation Retaliation, a chance for the Dogs to get some revenge in the first match against Auburn, win the SEC championship, go on to the college football playoff. We'll talk a lot about that on the show today. Seth Emerson's going to be with us, former Georgia quarterback David Green, who won a Georgia SEC championship back in 2002. He'll tell the story of that, preview the game against the Tigers, and we'll have some fun here as well as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I have to admit that in my regular life, I try to be kind of a nice guy and sort of kind to everyone that I meet, but there is a part of me as a college football fan which at times I can be a little bit vindictive, and I probably enjoy the misery of some of my team's rivals, maybe more than I should. I'll admit that readily here to start the program today. To that point, one of the most fun things about this college football season has not only been the 11-1 start that Georgia's off to and the ticket punch to the SEC championship and on the doorstep of the college football playoff. That's great, and that's really, really fun. But what has made it even better is the misery in which Georgia's been able to inflict on some of its rivals. Think about Tennessee. You know, Georgia wins that game with 41-0, the final score, and really kind of putting one of the final nails in the coffin of Butch Jones as Vols coach. They're obviously a mess today. It's kind of nice to think if you're a Georgia fan, the Dogs helped send them there. Same thing for Florida. And we know for a fact that Georgia played a major role in this. 42-7 down there in Jacksonville. Y'all know how I feel about that rivalry anyway. I loved the blowout score, and I loved the very next day finding out that Jim McElwain had been sent packing because of maybe he could not substantiate some death threat claims, but nonetheless, the 42-7 loss to Georgia doesn't help there. So the damage done to rivals has been almost as fun as the success that Georgia has enjoyed, or maybe said better, it has enhanced for me the success that Georgia has enjoyed this season. It's been kind of nice to see Tennessee and Florida kind of put back in their place. And really, when you look ahead to Saturday in the SEC championship, even with everything that Georgia has at stake here, can accomplish winning the SEC title, getting into the Final Four, having a chance to win the national championship. There's also still maybe at least a slight chance that Georgia can do more of on Saturday what it did to some of its other rivals early in the year. I'm talking about Tennessee. I'm talking about Florida a moment ago. Think about Gus Malzahn here. Is there a chance that even though Malzahn seems to be riding high coming off the Iron Bowl win against Alabama a week ago, is there a chance that Georgia could sort of spin the coaching drama wheel here one more time? And maybe if Auburn loses to Georgia, maybe if they don't play well, maybe if Auburn fans' frustration rises up again, maybe all of a sudden that Auburn, or I should say that Gus Malzahn leaving Auburn to go to Arkansas, maybe those rumors get cranked up again, and maybe that's exactly what happens. Let me give you an example of why it may not be all that far removed from the truth to think this could actually be a possibility. Mike Irvin's a TV reporter out there in the state of Arkansas. Yesterday, he tweeted this. I want to show you this on the screen. If you're watching this on video, if you're listening to us, I'll read it to you. This is what Irwin out in Arkansas said, that friends of Gus Malzahn have been trying to convince me, he means himself, for 10 years that he, meaning Malzahn's, Razorback at heart and will accept his, quote, dream job anytime it's offered. Well, it's about to be offered. We'll know in a few days if they know him as well as they think they do. Hashtag moment of truth. And I know a lot of Auburn fans, were they to be listening, we've had some folks from Auburn tuning into the show this week. They would say, listen, all that stuff about Malzahn before, the fact that he might think about Arkansas, that's all water under the bridge now, because did you not see? Auburn just beat Alabama on Saturday, and Malzahn's a hero again on the plains once again. But we also know this. We know that at Auburn, things have a way of changing pretty quickly. And sometimes the quick change is a change for the worse. It's the panic that led to a firing of Gene Chizik and a firing of Tommy Tuberville, maybe even a firing of Terry Bowden before that. Auburn gets tired of coaches about as quickly as anyone could, and that sort of fatigue with Gus Malzahn, I think, has created some fatigue with Malzahn back towards them. And Georgia, as it's celebrating on the field Saturday, holding up that SEC sign that the SEC champions always hold up, taking that trophy to the center of Mercedes-Benz Stadium and finding out who's going to play in the college football playoff, it might look back on things and say, you know what, while Georgia's enjoying all of that, it's also sent Auburn into the kind of mess that Tennessee was in, Florida was in, where it may also have to look for a new coach if you believe the rumors coming out of Arkansas that maybe Malzahn still would give a look to the Razorbacks because of his affection for his home state, because maybe he's just tired of all the drama that always seems to go on at Arkansas. Of course, the question would be here, though, if that's going to happen, if Georgia's going to create that situation for Auburn, if Georgia's going to create those problems for the Tigers and Malzahn, it's going to have to find a way to win the game. And how is that going to happen? How can Georgia make it different this time than last time? Well, over the course of the next two days, that's a lot of what we're going to talk about, how Georgia can win this rematch against the Tigers, and a lot of people weighing in on this right now. One of the guys who did on ESPN recently is the analyst Marcus Spears. And I thought that Marcus, when he spoke about this, said something that I believe almost every Georgia fan is going to agree with. Here's Marcus Spears from ESPN.
Hit the big plays. Remove people from the box. And then when Auburn is playing man-to-man coverage, single safety high is what they're living in right now. Wims won a one-on-one on the sideline, loosened things up. They went right back to the pass, hit a crossing route for another big gain. You have to make defenses pay that want to get after you by hitting big plays.
I don't think there's any doubt that's true, what he's saying there. Georgia needs more of that against Auburn. It's a tougher question to figure out how exactly that happens. You know, Spears references Javon Wims there. The one-on-one battle that Wims won in the game was the pass that the officials actually ruled an incompletion because they thought Wims was out of bounds. Replay may have shown that he was in bounds, but it's an example nonetheless of a UGA receiver doing in that moment what maybe more of should have been done in the a game against Auburn a few weeks ago. You have to create those opportunities for Fromm. You have to create those big passing play moments. Georgia had a couple of those on that first drive. You had the Wims conversion on third down. You had the big Terry Gowan catch on first down. All of a sudden, you blink your eye, Georgia has a 7-0 lead, but never got much more of that after the fact. Now, of course, for Georgia to create some of that against Auburn this week in the SEC Championship, Georgia needs more than just its receivers to step up and play well if they want to create this turmoil for Auburn and cause these problems. Georgia also needs maybe a little more from Jake Fromm than it got the first time around. This week, Kirby Smart, as you might imagine, talked a little bit about Jake Fromm and what he's looking to see from his freshman signal caller.
It's really important that he plays with poise. You know, he's under duress every game that I've seen. I mean, the quarterback position in this league, you're going to be under duress. It's one of those that he has to execute the plan, not try to be superhuman, allow his playmakers around him to help make plays and play within the system. You know, big part of this game is not making turnovers.
Listen, I mean, the bottom line for me is everything that Kirby Smart just said there is 100% true. You do need poise from Fromm. My assumption is you'll get it. Fromm needs to avoid turnovers. Kirby says that. That's obviously true, too. But it's more than just avoiding mistakes. It's creating opportunities. And I think that Fromm has shown this season with his completion percentage and his attempt number that he's the kind of guy that can create opportunities for Georgia. My guess is that Fromm is going to play a lot better this time than last time. And I think guys like Javon Wims have probably, even just the last couple of weeks, become even more confident as receivers, gotten even better. I mean, I think the passing game for Georgia does set itself up for more success this weekend than maybe what you saw the first time around when these two teams played. But obviously, Auburn won the first time. And you listen to a lot of Tigers fans this week, they think it's their birthright to kind of come in here and win the rematch. They can't imagine a world in which they're not going to be celebrating the same way they were last week after the Iron Bowl and a couple weeks before that against Georgia. But the Dogs have a way of kind of changing that narrative a little bit. And maybe, as we said a moment ago, if that narrative does change, maybe they will kind of find themselves a little more irritated with Malzahn. And maybe Malzahn would flirt with Arkansas all over again. The thing that we got to remember here, though, for any of this to happen, the Georgia offense definitely has to be better. And my guess is this weekend it will be. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Thanks for being with us on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. on the DawgNation Facebook page, on the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and in podcast form anywhere podcasts are found, iTunes, SoundCloud, the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are just glad to have you with us. I do want to say, for those of you who were able to join us last night, the Marlowe's in Brookhaven, first of all, you know that Marlowe's Tavern is a terrific home for us. Every time we have a big event, Marlowe's always been gracious enough to host that for us and give us a spot there. We're always really glad to do that. Last night was one of our biggest and best ever. The fun that we had at Marlowe's was just really unmatched. Hearing from a lot of Georgia fans about their excitement about seeing the Dogs in the SEC Championship, what's going to happen this Saturday, and just really a great time to be a Dog fan. It was a great opportunity last night to celebrate and enjoy some of that with DawgNation for our big game preview. We got some more stuff coming up at Marlowe's here in the weeks ahead, leading up to the early signing period with recruiting, and then National Signing Day, the official, the old school date in February. We're going to tell you more about that coming up in the days ahead. If you missed us last night, though, still a chance to see DawgNation on Saturday. Our DawgNation invasion hits Atlanta on Saturday, the Blue Lot, for our big tailgate starting at 10 a.m., leading up to a kickoff there in Atlanta at 4 p.m. It's brought to you by Kroger, Dixie Vodka, R.S. Andrews, ATL Next, and Gordo's Cheese Dip. And we're going to have a lot of giveaways that day, a lot of fun stuff. I talked to a lot of folks last night who said, you know what? We were at the DawgNation Invasion in Jacksonville. We are definitely coming to the DawgNation Invasion in Atlanta, and the reason why they mentioned it is because we want to be a part of that Dixie Vodka tasting lounge again. This was a big hit in Jacksonville. We're going to have that set up again. The folks from Dixie Vodka are going to be with us. So please, if you're walking around Atlanta, come on by and see us in the Blue Lot for our DawgNation Invasion tailgate. The folks from Dixie Vodka are going to be there, and they are one of our fine sponsors of this event. And by the way, if you want to find out what the South's best tasting vodka tastes like, or if you want to give it as a gift this holiday season, Dixie Vodka's got a great offer for you. They're going to give you free shipping this holiday season, but you've got to use the promo code DixieSEC. Please use the promo code DixieSEC on that. I have been tweeting out links to the show every day. You have been retweeting those. Thank you for doing that. I've been drawing a name from one of the retweets each and every day, and I've been giving away one of our Own the East t-shirts. I'll continue to do that through at least the rest of this week. We'll get an update on that after that. For now, though, let me congratulate today's winner, Earl Wise. Earl Wise, you're the winner of the Own the East t-shirt for today. We drew your name before the show today, so we'll be in contact with you soon about how you can pick up your t-shirt, but congratulations on that, and thank you all for sharing the show at DawgNation Daily on Twitter, and thanks for being a part of the program here on DawgNation Daily. Seth Emerson coming up in just a moment. Let me get into a couple things here before we bring on Seth. You know, we talked on the show yesterday about the visit from new Florida coach Dan Mullen to five-star quarterback Justin Fields. We've called it laughable here on DawgNation Daily. Jeff Sintel's explained why, and you see a pretty quick response from Georgia to the visit from Mullen to Fields, and I think this is the kind of visit that's going to carry some weight. Justin Fields himself tweeting this from his own Twitter account here. You see in the house, beautiful Christmas tree in the Fields house there, but standing in front of that tree is the five-star quarterback with Dell McGee. McGee, the Georgia assistant that Fields probably closest to. What Fields writes here is, had a great time with Dell McGee last night, and then he says this. For those of you seeing on video, you can see it for yourself, but I'll read it for the folks who are listening. Dell McGee, the best recruiter in the country. So for a lot of the Florida fans who are all hopeful and excited about the chance that maybe Mullen, who's going to sweep in and steal Justin Fields away from Georgia, is a big blow to sort of start his Florida coaching tenure off on a strong start, I think the Fields tweet there might quiet some of that down just a little bit. And as far as why maybe someone like McGee would want to go visit Fields on the heels of the Dan Mullen visit, well, it's probably self-evident, but maybe an explanation came from something else that Kirby Smart said this week about a different subject. Here was Kirby Smart. We played it for you yesterday, but it's an important reminder after the McGee in-home visit with Justin Fields. Take a listen.
These kids can change their mind at any time. So, you know, when they tell you they're coming, sometimes you have to keep recruiting them the whole time because things change, circumstances change, kids change their mind from time to time.
Yeah, so listen, when I say that I believe it's laughable that Justin Fields would go to Florida, it's not because I take his recruitment at Georgia for granted. I don't think any Georgia coach would dare take that for granted. There is a knowledge that even for guys who are solid in your class, you've still got to keep reaching out. You've still got to make contact. Even on a busy week like this for the SEC championship, you've still got to do that. But Georgia has been great at doing that, and the relationships it's built with these guys in the South that gives them an advantage over Johnny-come-lately like Dan Mullen, who's been spending the last few years at Starkville, Mississippi. And a lot of high-profile attention to Justin Fields' visit I don't think does anything to change that. But with that said, let's turn our attention back to the SEC Championship on Saturday just for a moment. Of course, one of the things that's been getting a lot of attention is what Malzahn, the Auburn coach, said on the field right after the game when Auburn won in, frankly, blowout fashion against Georgia in Jordan-Hare Stadium back in early November. Y'all remember it, but in case you're maybe new to the program or new to this rivalry, here is what Malzahn said that's sort of gotten some Georgia fans pretty steamed since then.
We whipped the dog crap out of them.
We whipped the dog crap out of them. That is what Malzahn said there. Georgia fans don't like that. And one of the ways we've been seeing Georgia fans kind of respond to that this week here around this show is with the hashtag DawgNation Retaliation. Now, the reason why we picked the word retaliation is because it rhymes with DawgNation, but also because, we feel like the revenge tour had been talked about so much that it was almost time to kind of up the ante on that a little bit, and we thought retaliation seemed like a nice word and a nice way to do that, and we've seen some great stuff on Twitter about that this week. Let me show you a couple of examples here. I love this from @BeanZach on Twitter. He says, @Coach Gus Malzahn, here's a pic of @Football UGA Bulletin Board this week. You made it. I love the exclamation mark there. Hashtag DawgNation Retaliation. And it is a great sort of Photoshop of one of those old school bulletin boards with the dog emoji and the poop emoji right there on the screen. I love that from Zach on Twitter. I think that's really clever. Here's Brooks Luss, who joined us last night for our DawgNation big game preview at the Marlows in Brookhaven. He says, thanks, Jeff Centel, DawgNation Daily, for the hospitality at Marlows tonight. The DawgNation Retaliation, hanging out with some of his good friends, Bassin Dog, who's a good friend of ours here at DawgNation Daily as well, and Jamie Goodman. So love seeing the DawgNation Retaliation being used last night at the Marlows in Brookhaven. And then Alan Gurry here, I like this. Drudge Report had a tweet that says dogs are smarter than cats. Alan says, we already knew that dogs are smarter, hoping they also win on Saturday. Hashtag beat Auburn. Hashtag DawgNation Retaliation. Hashtag SEC Championship. So really good stuff there from Alan. Really good stuff from all of you on that who've been using that hashtag. Continue to use that this week as we remind Gus Malzahn that what he said is going to be a lot of problem for a lot of Georgia fans, and maybe after the result on Saturday, he may regret doing just that. It is great to have you in the program. We've got former Georgia quarterback David Green later on. Hope you enjoy Seth Emerson right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insight.
And we'll get ready to say hello to Seth Emerson here on the program, obviously doing a lot of preview of the Georgia-Auburn game on Saturday and the SEC Championship. And Seth, I guess if you don't mind, let me start with this. I don't think that you would probably say that you're surprised that Georgia's in the title game. Georgia was considered one of the favorites to win the East back during the offseason. But maybe is it fair to say that you, me, and a lot of other people might be surprised by Georgia having such a realistic chance of actually winning this game on Saturday, being SEC champion? That does seem to be a step towards maybe exceeding the preseason expectations. Fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair, and it's not the only surprise. I think before the season I picked my angle on the season was that I thought Georgia would win the East, but probably wasn't good enough to beat Alabama in the title game. Well, they're not playing Alabama, so that's not the only thing that the dynamic that's a little different. What is interesting is, and I speak as one of these people who kind of goes into this thinking the game's a coin flip. But what is interesting is that Auburn beat Georgia so badly by 23 points and doubled them up in total yards. It was thorough just 3 weeks ago, and yet so many people going into this game either picking Georgia or expecting a real close game. So it does speak to how well Georgia has played this year and the expectation that people have that, well, maybe that was just one bad day for what's a really good Georgia team.
You mentioned a surprise that Auburn's here instead of Alabama. How different do you think the conversation is this week if it was Alabama? Obviously Vegas would have made Alabama a bigger favorite than Auburn has been in the game, but do you think that there would be sort of less optimism on the Georgia side if it was a team like Alabama who'd won the last three?
Probably. There would be so many different storylines. I'm just thinking selfishly as a writer. Think of Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, sure. Jeremy Pruitt facing his former team. So many storylines, so many elements. Whereas the storyline is just a rematch, and everyone looking at the previous game and wondering how it will be changed. And the thing is also, one reason that so many people are picking Georgia, or at least think this is going to be closer, is because the first game was in Auburn, and Auburn beat Alabama at Jordan-Hare also, and so that's a big home field advantage, and now they have that taken away. Whereas if Alabama had won that game at Auburn, I think the line on the game would be higher. It'd probably be around 6 or 7, Alabama favored, and there'd be a lot of the other thing being that Alabama, if it had been them, I guess this would have been their 4th straight championship game appearance. Yeah. So, it's old hat for the players, for Nick Saban, for the staff. They know how to, get up for a championship game after playing in the Iron Bowl, and this isn't that huge a deal. Their main goal is to get to the national championship game and win it this time rather than last year. Well, the intangible kind of swings back now, and Auburn and Georgia are kind of both in the same boat. Now, there may be a few Auburn players who were around in 2013, the last time they played in the championship game, and Gus Malzahn and some of the staff was there too. But nobody at Georgia has played in this championship game before, and yeah, it's kind of new and it's fresh, and both teams in a way come into this playing with house money. It's a good season, I think, for either team, even if they lose this game. Even probably more so for Georgia, because this is kind of what everyone expected was. This is what people wanted. People wanted Georgia to get back to Atlanta, and everything else was kind of frosting on top. It would still be disappointing, obviously, if Georgia's not able to pull it off. Especially if, let's say, they have a big lead in the game and then lose it, or something like that. But in the large context of things, this is still a good season for Georgia, no matter what happens from here on out. In a way, it is for Auburn, too, because they beat Alabama and won the division, and Alabama didn't, so they're happy about that, too.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I am fascinated by this Gary Danielson subplot, more about the process behind it than the actual sort of facts on the ground. Can you kind of, as a guy that hears a lot of stuff on and off the record, can you kind of tell your perception of, did Kirby say this intending for it to be on TV or not?
I don't know. I mean, Brad Nessler, the part that stuck out for me, just kind of listening to it yesterday, and I was one of the people who was asking the question. And I wasn't, for one thing, let's just say straight out, I'm not treating this like Watergate or something.
Sure.
It's more just kind of fun and interesting. But it is insightful. It's a little bit of kind of the inside baseball coming outside for people to see, and so I think it's interesting that way. And then, Gary Danielson had a good point. He said the reason that I've aired this, the reason that I said this on the Iron Bowl when it was apparent there was going to be an Auburn-Georgia rematch, is because I think this could figure into the rematch. This is interesting. I think this should be in a public forum. These Friday production meetings, Kirby said this to them, Danielson and Nessler, in the Friday production meeting before the Kentucky game. We'll call it. CBS had the Kentucky game, and that's standard. You know this from your, you're inside the business too. So this always happens, and
sure.
And Kirby just mentioned it. Now, a lot of people want to say that Kirby was thinking 2 steps ahead. He's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, and so he said that knowing that Danielson would air it. I don't know. I mean, maybe he did. Maybe he was just kind of venting. Maybe he was saying it the way that people do, as in, I don't intentionally want him to say this, but I kind of like him knowing this, because maybe he will say it. But the background on this is that, every coach does this almost after every game. They send plays to the SEC and the conference office. I mean, I remember talking with Mark Richt after one of those controversial games. There were many. I don't know if it was Vanderbilt 2013, Auburn 2013, something like that. But I remember talking to him kind of in the hallway after a presser, after I'd asked him about, my feeling was that there should be more accountability for the officials when they, this stuff that, it can be kind of frustrating, not just as a fan, but as a media member, that, officials miss calls or make controversial calls, and then that's all we know. The coaches clam up. They're not allowed to talk about it. The SEC doesn't acknowledge any, accountability or anything. It just seems like there's no public accountability. Everything plays out behind the scenes. I remember talking to Rick about it, and I'm like, wouldn't it be better if a lot of this were public, so a lot of this were more transparent? And he said, no, I don't want this to be public. I'd rather that not be. Maybe Kirby would feel differently about it, but in this case, he said no comment, and that could be construed on Monday when he said that as kind of irked at Danielson for saying it, but it also could be construed as, we're good. This is out there now. Yeah. So, we're fine. I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish here.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes it sort of fun for me and kind of interesting as well. You wrote about the rematch aspect of this game. The number that you put out, the team that won Game 1 is 5-1 in SEC championships here, moving into the 7th time that there's been a rematch. Ken Massey, who's a mathematician that does one of the old computer models for the BCS, he put out some numbers on Twitter that in all of college football going back to 1995, rematches, the Game 1 winner 24-22, I believe he said, a couple games over 500 in the rematch. That sort of leads me to believe that it's sort of historically significant that Georgia's playing one of its biggest rivals for a second time during a season, but in terms of having any predictive impact on this game, I just don't think it does one way or another.
Well, those two stats contrast with each other, don't they? I guess it's 24-22 overall, but in an SEC championship game, it's 5-1.
Yeah.
Favoring the winner, the first one. I pointed out when I wrote about this Sunday that Kirby's been a part of one where the team on the losing end won the second time. It wasn't an SEC championship; it was the national championship, Alabama LSU. The difference there was they had a month to change. I mean, there's so many different variables. I haven't gone in and broken up every single rematch. But what, in that case of Alabama LSU, they had that month to adjust, and the first game was close. I mean, the first game was 9-6, and then the second time Alabama won handily. Mm-hmm. This time around, what I just wonder about is whether, like I said, there's so many intangibles that have kind of flipped to Georgia's end. You wonder if they can play as badly, if they don't make mistakes this time, et cetera, et cetera. But something, on the other hand, that kind of favors Auburn that I keep coming back to is that game wasn't close the first time, and there's only a 3-week turnaround. Is there time for Georgia to flip that? Is home field advantage being taken away from Auburn enough to flip that and flip what happened on the lines of scrimmage on both sides? Guess we'll find out Saturday.
Well, you mentioned the home field advantage part. I know that Gary Danielson also talked about that briefly during the teleconference that he and Brad Nessler did this week with a lot of the media. And listen, I'm in the opinion business, and it seems like there's some reason to sort of back up an opinion like that. The crowd was so loud for the Georgia game, appeared to be that way on TV against Alabama. Auburn did not play nearly as well at LSU, at Clemson this season. I mean, as a more sort of objective, level-headed guy, I mean, do you think it's fair to say, let's find out, is Auburn as good away from Jordan-Hare Stadium? Is that a reasonable talking point right now?
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, I was texting with an Alabama writer this morning, starting about something else, and I was just kind of asking his take on the game, and he, having just been at Jordan-Hare 5 days ago, was saying that, people underestimate how big a factor that is in their favor, something that maybe Georgia should look at as far as their Sanford Stadium atmosphere. I know they're unbeaten at home this year, and none of the games were close, but I know some fans have remarked about that, but that's a whole other thing. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge advantage that's been taken away from Auburn. Now the question is that a 23-point, 200 total yard swing? Is that enough? Probably not. You need some other things to work in your favor, too, which could be working in Georgia's favor, too, especially if they don't make mistakes and everything. But, the other thing is, you're right, they lost 2 games on the road, but that was early in the season, and number one, that was Clemson. Clemson's really good. Clemson's probably a lot of teams picked to win the national championship right now. And Jarrett Stidham is playing a lot better than he was at that point. Something DJ Shockley was talking about with me the other day is he's just kind of breaking down film, and it's obvious Stidham's a lot more comfortable than he was back when they were playing Clemson. And the LSU game, Auburn lost that game ultimately, but they came out strong. I mean, they were rolling at the start. So they started that game like they were playing the Jordan-Hare, but then obviously they didn't finish it that way.
If I was going to feel maybe the number one reason why I think a Georgia fan, apart from like the players in the field, why this one may go different than the first one did, it's not for me the nature of the rematch as much as it is the fact that Auburn has to play Georgia a week after what on TV looked like just an all-out knockdown dragout against Alabama. And Seth, I just think it's really hard to pick yourself back up and do the same kind of game 2 weeks in a row. Georgia only having to play Georgia Tech, I think, helps in that regard. Do you agree with that?
Maybe, but Auburn was able to do it in 2013.
True.
So, and they've, Georgia's, I guess, I pointed out, it was not a hard game against Georgia Tech this year, but they've also researched it, and Georgia was 5-0 against Georgia Tech in years that they played in the SEC championship the next week, and I guess obviously are 2-3 in those SEC championship games. So it can kind of go back and forth. I mean, I know that's something that could. That was another thing that this Alabama writer was telling me. It was like he's wondering about has Auburn kind of, reached their limit? Are they close to hitting the wall? They've had a bunch of big games here, and maybe Georgia's helped that they've only had the one big game maybe it helps Auburn. I think the ultimate thing that helps Georgia is that in that big game, Kerryon Johnson got hurt. So Georgia escaped the Georgia Tech game without any major injuries. Trenton Thompson left and then came back. So that I think was the main thing that benefited Georgia.
Along those lines, I've talked to a lot of smart people this week, and the consensus that seems to be built from those comments is people expect Kerryon Johnson to play, and they expect him probably not to be 100%. First of all, do you agree with that assessment? Will play, but not at 100%. And beyond that, do we have any idea what that means, what less than 100% of Kerryon Johnson looks like in a game of this magnitude?
Well, I think that, obviously it'll be something we'll watch closely in warm-up. I don't think there's any reason for them not to dress him out. They'll come and dress him out, even if they've kind of privately ruled him out. I expect him to play at this point. But yeah, look, here's no one wants to, admit to this. No one wants to talk about this much, but hitting a guy in the shoulder is not targeting. So you can't tell me that when Kerryon Johnson has the ball, or maybe even when he doesn't, some Georgia players are going to be testing that shoulder. That's clearly a favor. That's something in Georgia's favor. The only thing that helps Auburn this week is that they go in knowing that they may not be able to count on him. So they're giving reps to these other guys. They're planning around it. In much the same way that Georgia, unlike the first time against Auburn, is probably planning for a plan B if the run game doesn't work. Like the first time when they played them, they didn't really have a plan B. They couldn't run the ball for the first time all year, and they were lost. This time they're going in with an alternate plan, which could even be the primary plan.
You had a report refuting a report that was out there about Georgia. I want to ask you about that before we're done here in a moment. Let me squeeze in one more thing real quick before we do. Loved your piece comparing Jake Fromm, Jarrett Stidham. I think that's a huge storyline for Saturday. Loved DJ Shockley's quotes in that piece, kind of analyzing when he saw the two quarterbacks. And just briefly, if you don't mind, I hate to ask you a talk-about question, but would you mind talking about just how important you think this battle between the two quarterbacks might be on Saturday?
Yeah, it's something that I attacked it in the way that I look at everyone's talking about the run games for both teams and how those loomed so prominently. Georgia's inability to do it the first time and Auburn's ability to do it the first time, but then can they do it now with Kerryon Johnson either out or limited? And I said, what this adds up to is I think the quarterbacks are going to matter more this game. You look at Jarrett Stidham's stat line from the first game, and it's impressive, but you don't really remember it that much. You remember the long touchdown pass to Darius Slayton, but what you remember from that game is Kerryon Johnson. Now, Jarrett Stidham, who is probably the best quarterback in the SEC right now in terms of how he's playing, more will probably be put on his plate this game. They're gonna need more, not just because of the Kerryon Johnson injury, but because Georgia's gonna focus on that run game a little bit more. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they say we're gonna not have Kerryon Johnson on our minds as much. We're not gonna let Stidham beat us because we're gonna kind of count on Auburn not being able to run the ball. So I think how Stidham throws the ball, whether he sticks to that 69% completion percentage and everything, is important on that side of the ball. And I just think it's evident that Georgia's going to go in this knowing that with the way it played out the first time, they can't depend on Chubb, Michelle, and Swift being able to run the ball the way they have in the other 11 games. And more is going to have to be put on Jake Fromm. And that also means more, and this point was made by Gary Danielson when I asked him about it, and DJ Shockley. It's not really just Fromm. Fromm to the outside world is a guy that, can he do it? He's just a game manager. But those of us who have watched all year have said, no, when he needs to make the passes, he's generally made them. The problem is, if he doesn't have blocking. He didn't have blocking against Auburn. So the key against Auburn is going to be whether they're going to be able to protect and the play calling. And DJ Shockley also mentioned that the receivers need to do a better job of getting separation, getting open. The play calling needs to help them. They need to. I know what they say about screen passes, but I think at some point you got to throw screen passes. Sure. They got to go to the tight ends, and they got to do better with the quick slants and RPOs and stuff. They got to get around the fact that when the first time when they did regular dropbacks, Fromm just didn't have time to pass. So you add all that up, and the passing games on both sides of it are going to be vital.
We're late. Let me do this quick. There was a report that Georgia had been getting some consulting help from former Ole Miss coach Hugh Freeze. Your sources, though, tell a different story on that. Would you mind just bringing that to the audio and video audience, what you wrote at the forum at forum.dawgnation.com a little earlier today?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kirby Smart and Hugh Freeze are friends, from what I've heard. So they've undoubtedly texted or talked immediately after Freeze got fired, maybe a little bit in the preseason, you know, how you doing, that kind of thing. But UGA released a statement in response to the report saying, no, he is not a consultant. He is not receiving any compensation. You know, and I heard from someone I talked to within the program, it's like, no, he's not, you know, he's not breaking down film for us. We're not sending him stuff in Mississippi for him to look at and whatever, you know, nothing like that's happening. You know, could it actually be true and Georgia just doesn't want to be publicly associated with Freeze right now? Maybe. But, you know, I did get strong off the record and on the record denials about it for what it's worth.
Hey, Seth, thanks for your time. Looking forward to your coverage this week in Atlanta. Appreciate you spending some extra time with us today on DawgNation Daily, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Brandon.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Interesting stuff there from Seth Emerson. Obviously, the issue with Hugh Freeze is he's obviously an offensive mind that is unquestioned. I mean, that's a smart football guy, but maybe a bit untouchable right now, coming off the reasons for why he was dismissed at Ole Miss. And, you know, would Kirby Smart like to bring him in as a consultant, as an analyst, if he didn't have quite the same, you know, reputation dings coming off the Ole Miss thing? We may never know that for sure. It's going to be interesting to see if Freeze ever gets a chance, at least in the very near future, to coach again, because, boy, it did not end for him well there at Ole Miss, and that's probably one of the reasons why Georgia felt the need to publicly refute a report that was out there that he was working as an analyst and a consultant to Georgia, much the same way that Brian Van Gorder would have last year, that Jake Johnson does now, or, you know, in a not the same circumstance, but also for a guy that received some public shame like Steve Sarkisian, who was USC head coach, had to leave that job for some unpleasant reasons, and he did emerge as an analyst at Alabama before becoming the offensive coordinator for one game before moving on to the Atlanta Falcons. That's a situation where maybe, I won't pretend to explain why those situations are different, but in this case, they just were. As far as our SEC through, let's get ready to transition to that. I'll tell you that David Green's coming up here in a couple of minutes. We'll talk to the former Georgia quarterback. I'll also remind you that DawgNation Daily is brought to you in part today by our friends at Georgia United Credit Union. Make sure you're on the lookout for our Georgia United Credit Union planning for the opponent piece coming up at DawgNation.com a little later on today. And also make sure you look out for the brand new Georgia United Credit Union Unified Checking Account, the account that gives you the comforts of a free checking account with the options to earn more. A simple, convenient, rewarding checking account that fits your lifestyle. Visit GUCU.org for the terms and conditions that apply to this account. Federally insured by NCUA. All right, Tennessee gets turned down again. Jeff Brom, the Purdue coach, was rumored to be on the doorstep of getting the job, but then he decided to stay in West Lafayette, Indiana, which could not have been a good feeling for Tennessee fans to lose this guy who had been a great offensive mind at Western Kentucky and done some great things there with the Hilltoppers of Bowling Green, Kentucky, and, you know, goes on to Purdue, gets the job over guys like Les Miles, and is largely thought to be a rising star in the coaching ranks, but maybe not quite ready to rise from the Big Ten to Tennessee here. Maybe this is an example of the program's reputation just being sullied coming off the way that the Greg Schiano thing happened. I will still continue to say, and I know this is not popular with some listeners to DawgNation Daily, viewers to DawgNation Daily, who want me to just beat up on Tennessee at all times. I don't fault the Tennessee fans for kind of pushing back on Greg Schiano for whatever reason they did. I don't think Schiano would have been a great hire for the Vols. Georgia fans, I think, would have loved it. I think that Tennessee fans rightly kind of push back against it. I'm going to blame John Curry, the athletic director, for the problems. I'm not going to blame the response to the Tennessee fans, because we all know that if Georgia fans were watching their program do something that they thought was damaging to the future of the program, you better believe that Georgia fans en masse would kind of rise up and respond together. And I don't fault the Tennessee fans for doing the same thing that Georgia fans would do in a similar situation. Todd Grantham is going to be the defensive coordinator of Florida. He sort of bids farewell to Mississippi State with a I don't have the the text of this to show you on video. We'll show you this on AT&T SEC Country Live today. He wrote a little letter on Twitter, one of those Notes app letters that he kind of put out sort of saying goodbye to the Mississippi State fans. This thing is like riddled with grammar errors and spelling errors. It's kind of funny to see a coach write this way, but nonetheless, that was his goodbye, and he's on his way to Gainesville to go be the Florida defensive coordinator, and Gators fans will tell you it's going to be a great hire, and this is going to be great news for Florida, despite the fact that it wasn't that long ago Steve Spurrier, the icon in Gainesville when he was a South Carolina coach, was mocking Grantham for not being able to defend the read option that South Carolina ran to such great success against one of Grantham's defenses at Georgia. So it all kind of comes full circle here. I don't think Grantham's a good hire for Dan Mullen. I think Mullen's a good head coach. I think Grantham's probably a poor defensive coordinator. Something else in Steve Spurrier, which I thought was kind of interesting. Spurrier's got some audio out there, and we'll play this for you today as well on AT&T SEC Country Live, where he made it pretty clear that he thought that Chip Kelly was not a good fit for the SEC. Now, some people can say, well, this is just what he's supposed to say now. He's kind of in a position to sort of toe the company line for who Florida did hire with Dan Mullen. We told you a lot here on this show. There was a lot of evidence leading up to the hire that Spurrier was not backing Chip Kelly when it seemed like a foregone conclusion, and that's what was going to happen there. I get the impression that Spurrier never wanted Chip Kelly, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't think Chip Kelly was ever going to be hired. We'll talk more about all these stories on AT&T SEC Country Live today. And with that said, let's get ready to close up our SEC through and transition over to the former Georgia quarterback, David Green, a great guy to talk to in a day like this, because as Georgia heads to the SEC championship game, David knows what that feels like. He played in two, and he brought Georgia its first national championship in 20 years back in 2002. David, thanks for being on the show today, and I guess if you don't mind, let me start with that right there. I mean, this is such an easy question to ask. I'm sure it's an easy one to answer, but, I mean, how did that feel? You knew the hunger that Georgia fans had to get to Atlanta, win that game. You provided it to the Dogs with your play and your teammates' play that season. What was it like to be on that team and have that accomplishment?
I tell you, it was fun. You know, Brandon, I remember playing or practicing this week. It's a great feeling. When you're practicing and nobody else is, good things are normally taking place. And so when you know all the other teams are off, obviously except one other on the West, you've had a good season. And I don't know. I think before this game, obviously it was the biggest game of our lives at that point. And but just having some calm. I mean, there was plenty of confidence there, and I think everybody on the team was confident we could get the job done, and I just remember the excitement that, you know, just going and playing in the dome and being indoors on the turf. It's just such a different environment than what you're used to, you know, playing in college football, obviously on grass. Even little subtleties like the crown of the field. You know, we're used to playing on a crown, and you get in the dome, and it's flat. So the quarterback, it's actually a little bit different throwing out routes because you're not throwing downhill. So there's little things like that are different that, you know, probably the average fan doesn't think about. But it was a ton of fun.
And against Arkansas that day, I mean, you couldn't say this at the time, but all these years later, I'm sure you're probably willing to admit, y'all knew y'all were not losing that game, right?
Well, you know, honestly, at that time, I don't think it really mattered who we played. We felt like we were going to win. I mean, we were just coming off a huge win against Tech. Well, I think we had, you know, scored 50-plus points, and it was like 51-7. And we were really playing good football at that time. And, you know, we were peaking at the right time. But, yeah, I mean, we were confident going into that game. And, you know, special teams stepped up. That first drive, blocked the punt. I think the first snap I took, we were on the 1-yard line going in. So that's not a bad way to start it off.
How much do you wish there had been a playoff in 2002?
Oh, I know. It's you know, typically if you lose one game in the SEC, you know, you still get a chance to play for the whole thing. And, you know, we lost that one game, had that one slip up against Florida, and it cost us because I think, you know, at that time Miami and Ohio State both had undefeated years, and it cost us a chance at the big one. Yeah,
had there been a playoff in 2002, I think the Dogs definitely wouldn't have been in it. That would have been a lot of fun to see. Let's transition to this one on Saturday for a moment, if you don't mind. Obviously, it's a rematch. We saw it go poorly for Georgia the last time. What do you look at that gives you hope that it's better for Georgia the second go-around here?
Well, I think a few things. I think not being in Jordan-Hare certainly helps. I mean, the environment, when Auburn has a good team, that is a very, very difficult place to play. And, you know, momentum is such a huge thing in football. Look, I think their running back, you know, even if Kieran Johnson plays, I think psychologically he's not going to be the same, just because if you've got messed up shoulders, and you could tell the kind of pain he was in at the end of that Alabama game. I could only imagine having to bust up in the hole and hit Roquan Smith head on. You got to think there's going to be, he's not going to be 100%, and he's a big part of their offense. I do think Auburn right now is the best team in the country. I think they're the most complete team. I think for Georgia, our key is, we got to grab momentum early. We got to hang on to it offensively. I think we've got to do really, really well on first and second downs. We got to be able to open it up and, Jake, throw the ball, all over the park and make some big plays offensively on those first and second downs. Because the one thing, you get in third and long with Auburn, it doesn't matter if you're Jalen Hurts or, John Elway or Jake Fromm. It's going to be tough because Auburn's got a really, really good defense, especially when they know it's a passing down. And so we've really got to offensively make sure that we can avoid those. And then, we're going to have to find a way in the trenches to get some movement. We got some of the best backs in the country, and golly, if you just give them an inch, they'll take a mile. We just got to find a way to get that inch. And whether it's through angles or double teams or what have you, we just got to find a way to get a little push up front.
David, I know that downtown Athens is a great place for Christmas shopping. A lot of folks getting ready to start doing that. And you want to walk around a beautiful downtown and sort of soaking in a lot of those stores. One of the best ones there is that Tailgate Apparel, 279 East Broad Street. We talk about that every time that you're on. And, a lot of these Georgia fans who are listening right now and watching right now, they got some tough folks to buy for. It's sort of hard to know what somebody wants. I've been to Tailgate Apparel. I've seen the stuff. I've gotten some of the apparel there from Tailgate Apparel. And if you're looking for a great Christmas gift, David, I think you would agree that there's really no better choice for the UGA fan in your life than what they're selling right there at Tailgate.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I tell you, they've got some great stuff. They've had a great year too. It's been fun. Go to the home games, and it's funny more and more. Store's only been around for about a year. But I'm seeing more and more people walking around with the tailgate gear on, and so it's been a lot of fun, kind of partnering with those guys on the ground floor and watching the way they've grown. I mean, that's one of the main reasons I kind of partnered up with them to begin with, is just because I knew how good the product was, and I knew if we could just let the Georgia fans know about it, that it would really have a chance to do well, and it's already catching fire.
David, I appreciate your time today. I hope you enjoy the game this Saturday. It's always fun to have the show. Enjoy the weekend, and I'll hopefully look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you, buddy.
Good stuff there from former Georgia quarterback David Green and a SEC champion. Boy, I tell you what, last night at Marlowe's Brookhaven, somebody showed up wearing the 2002 SEC championship T-shirt. That's always a great throwback, a great callback to a terrific time, and maybe an era for Georgia that will return this Saturday as Kirby Smart tries to in year two what Rick did in year one. I should say in year two as well. That's win an SEC championship. All right, let me do my Gatorade countdown. These Florida folks, we're all happy they're thinking they're getting Justin Fields. We told them yesterday they're not. We think Dale McGee's presence at Fields' house yesterday also kind of proves that. And 331 days from right now, Florida gets another disappointment as Georgia, we think, gets another victory over Dan Mullen. He's going to get used to taking L's to the Dogs, I believe, whether it be in recruiting or on the field. And 331 days from now will be another example of that. It's our Gator Hater Countdown. We got some more On the East t-shirts we're going to give away here, so retweet from me the link to the show at DawgNation Daily. We'll give another one away tomorrow. Y'all have a good day. We're getting close to the SEC Championship. I can't wait. And if you're watching the show right now, we'll knock out some comments here, give you a chance to do that. Stephen Early says, 15 years, it's time. Not quite 15 since the last SEC Championship. What are we talking about? More like 12 years, right? 2005 to 2017. But certainly looking forward to hopefully breaking that drought on Saturday for sure. Yacoba Simba saying, hot rod, Rodrigo Blankenship going to be the edge in the game, going to win the game with a big field goal. Be nice to see. Trey Dukes asks, what's your opinion on our uniforms? By the way, Trey got all over me the other day because, his Facebook says TRAW, and that's what I used to call him, but he told me the other day it was Trey, and then he was on SEC Country Live yesterday afternoon, and I called him Trey. He thought I mispronounced his name again. I know how to say Trey from now on. What's my opinion on the uniforms? I'm like an old dude, right? I'm like 1,000 years old, and so my preference would be that Georgia wear the same uniforms every Saturday, wear the white and silver on the road, the red and silver at home. The black jerseys have kind of grown on me a little bit. I don't mind them. I like them more as a fashion statement than a motivational ploy. I was curious why Georgia didn't wear them at all this season. I thought they were going to wear them once per year. As long as Georgia doesn't do like some of these other teams do, where they wear like a different uniform every single Saturday. I mean, think about Ohio State here for a moment. I don't know if y'all saw, but in the Michigan game on Saturday, this is the biggest game they play all season long, and Ohio State's uniforms were unrecognizable. We couldn't tell which team it was. Now, you obviously knew who it was because of the Ohio State-Michigan game, but if you were just flipping channels, you would not have known who Michigan was playing based on how Ohio State looked. That's never how I want Georgia to be in any game. I don't want Georgia's uniforms to change so much that they become unrecognizable. I just think there's a reason why Apple never changes its logo. AT&T doesn't change its logo. All these major corporations. It's not like one day you go to McDonald's, they don't have the arch anymore. I mean, these companies keep these logos for a long time for a reason, because that brand recognition matters. And the apparel companies, now you got me going on a rant here, and this is not what I want to do. But the apparel companies have convinced the teams that, kids like these uniforms. But if kids like these uniforms, Oregon, Maryland, all these teams that change uniforms every week would be getting all the recruits. The fact of the matter is, who is it that gets all the recruits? Teams like Georgia, teams like Alabama, teams that don't change their uniforms very much. So the apparel companies like multiple uniforms because that's a lot more apparel that can be modeled and then sold. The recruits themselves don't change their mind on the basis of the uniforms all that much. So that's kind of my get off my lawn rant about the uniforms. Tony Lehman says, if we wear black, we'll get a penalty in each half. I think because we're the away team and should wear white. Yeah, I mean, I know that in some games in the past, and I know this is not, I don't think it's ever been done in an SEC championship, but you have had both teams wear their home uniforms. I think the problem with Georgia trying to wear black against Auburn is Auburn's already wearing blue, and so you'd have a bit of a contrast there. Alan Vrbanchik says Auburn cannot beat ranked teams on the road this season. Trey Dukes on the uniform says Georgia just needs to change the font. Yeah, maybe so. As long as they keep the black, the G or some version of that G on the side of the helmet, I guess I'm okay with that. Dennis Wood says, so BA, what you're saying is you don't want the red and then put the camouflage on it? Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I don't want that. Cheston Wainscott says, does Kirby go after Dan Enos now that Brett is gone, considering his first choice? I think that the Dan Enos thing here is a interesting thing to bring up because obviously Kirby did go after Dan Enos before he hired Jim Chaney. I think Kirby's happy with Chaney right now. I think that Dan Enos would probably go on to be a head coach again. Remember, when he left Central Michigan as its head coach to become Arkansas's offensive coordinator, it's one of the only times you'll ever see that. He gave himself a demotion. Now, you could argue SEC OC is a bigger deal than MAC head coach. I guess it's the MAC Central Michigan's in. But he left voluntarily a head coaching job to go become Arkansas offensive coordinator. So my guess is with Bielema gone, Enos may go back and be one of those head coaches again. But, if Kirby wanted to consider that, as you said, Dan Enos is available. And I will not lie to you. I have definitely thought about that myself. Trey Duke says, what's my opinion on bringing in Hugh Freeze to help him with the offense? So, as we said with Seth Emerson before, Georgia has totally refuted, both on and off the record, that Hugh Freeze is working in any capacity as a paid analyst for Georgia. But what my opinion is if he was, I wouldn't be mad about that. I mean, if anything, I might be glad about it because I think that Hugh Freeze is a really smart offensive guy. And I think that, let me see if I can explain this without making myself look bad. I think there's a moral responsibility that a head coach has. I don't know that there's a moral responsibility that an off-field analyst has. I mean, I think when you get far enough removed from the visible face, the visible leader of an organization, what that guy does in his personal life is sort of his business. Now, was Ole Miss right to fire Hugh Freeze? Yeah, I think they probably were. I mean, I think there is some, what's the word, moral turpitude you need to expect from your head coach, and I think there's some moral turpitude, to use that word one more time, that we all need to expect from each other, right? I mean, I have an obligation to my family to be a good guy, but I don't know that my offensive analyst has the same obligation to his fan base to, fidelity. I don't know. So I would not be scandalized if Hugh Freeze was working as an analyst for Georgia. He's not, apparently, but I wouldn't be scandalized if he was. The guy knows football, and who he was dialing on his cell phone does not impact his ability to read defenses. You couldn't hire him as a head coach, and right now you probably couldn't hire him as an offensive coordinator. But, at some point in time in the future, could I see a team employing Hugh Freeze, a really good play caller, as an offensive coordinator again? As time passes, I think that Freeze could emerge there, but he's probably untouchable as a head coach. Ray Duke says, it's not like Hugh Freeze is that bad of a person. He deserved to be fired, but goodness, people need a second chance. And Ray, he probably will get a second chance in some capacity. Probably not major head coach again, but working like Steve Sarkisian was going to be at Alabama as an offensive coordinator again. I could see that. Cortland Hendricks says, fiance is an Auburn grad. This is the ideal SEC championship game for me. I cannot wait. See you on the Blue Light Saturday. Yeah, Cortland, thanks for coming by to see us in the tailgate. We're looking forward to seeing you as well. And, listen, that is one of the things about the Georgia-Auburn rivalry. And I think it's because of the geographic. They're close. Auburn's close. We drove there back in November, much like many of y'all have for years and years. It doesn't take any time to get there. You can be there in the blink of an eye. And because of that sort of geographic proximity, there is a lot of mixed families here. A lot of, I've always said that I believe that when, those house divided license plates, tags that people put in the front of their car, I've always said that I believe there are more Georgia-Auburn ones of those sold than any other. As a matter of fact, I don't know who makes those. That'd actually be kind of a good question to ask them. Which house divided tag have they sold the most of? Because I would think that Georgia-Auburn is maybe up there near the top. Jeremy Lloyd says Tennessee should hire Peyton Manning as head coach. Listen, I certainly appreciate Vols fans, and they enjoy having Manning's involvement in all of this, and I'm sure that Manning's a pretty good ambassador for the program. He may run the Cleveland Browns at some point. But, I think that coaching's a hard job, and I think that, any rumor about a guy having never been a coach becoming a coach, I think that disrespects just how hard it is to be a coach. Tommy Odom says Soldier Boy in the fourth quarter. I did think about this, and this is going to be kind of a corny thing to say, but you know how like Wisconsin and Minnesota play for like Paul Bunyan's Axe, and all these Big Ten teams play for these trophies. In the SEC, we don't have a lot of trophy games, but I did sort of think that this could be kind of like the modern version of a trophy game, much the same way you play for like an old oaken bucket or an axe or something like that. The Georgia-Auburn game, the Deep South's oldest rivalry, maybe that's the new sort of like prize for winning. The winning team gets to play Soldier Boy on the field, because that's what Georgia obviously did to Auburn in 2007, back when the song was popular, to show you how long Auburn's willing to hold a grudge. 10 years later, they're blaring that song in the loudspeakers in the fourth quarter when they were up big. And so maybe that's the new tradition here. Maybe when Georgia wins the game in 2018, it's Soulja Boy cranking up on the loudspeaker again. And maybe 100 years from now, we'll talk about how it all started with the Superman song playing over the loudspeakers. Kenny Paul Stacy says, not to be confused with Kenny Paul Gino, the basketball starter. I need 2 tickets. Lost my voice every home game. I can help. Hook a brother up. Listen, Kenny, if I had the tickets, I'd love to give them to you. I don't have any more than you do. Jimmy Barnes says it's a terrible idea to play the Soldier Boy thing. I didn't tell you it's a good idea. I just said it was an idea. Scott McFadden says as long as Gary Danielson dances to it. And by the way, going back to what Kenny was saying about the tickets, can y'all believe how expensive these things are? I mean, last night the Marlows in Brookhaven, that was one of the biggest talking points, really, off the air of the night. People just, it's such a tough spot to be in, because I understand how Kenny and a lot of other Georgia fans feel. There is such a desire to be in this game, especially for guys like that who've been to them all season long, and many of you have been to all these games every year for however many years, and these tickets have just gotten really expensive. The Notre Dame ticket was really expensive. This ticket, and it's all because Georgia hasn't been here in a while, Auburn hasn't been here in a while, and they're both driving distance away. The tickets are outrageous. I mean, I will tell you, in 2002, I got lucky. Because back then, I did not have a lot of disposable income. And if the tickets had been as expensive then as they are now, I wouldn't have been able to go. But what I did was, Arkansas didn't sell their full allotment of tickets. And I got my phone out. This is back, I don't even know if I had a cell phone in 2002, to be totally honest with you. I was using the plugged-in phone at my grandmother's house, and I'm dialing that number, to the ticket office of Arkansas. Busy, dialing it busy, dialing it busy, dialing it busy. Finally dialed it again. Phone started ringing. Rang forever and forever and forever. Put me on hold forever and forever and forever. Finally got through, bought like 8 tickets because they were only, face value. Gave them out to all my friends. No, I didn't just give them. I got paid back. But So back in 2002, I got lucky. Now you can't do that in 2017 because Auburn's bringing all of its allotment with it. But back in 2002, I was right there with many of you who were trying to figure out how you're going to get in this year for sure. All right, let me read what Matt Daniel says here. This looks like it's going to be pretty interesting. He says, back in 2007, athletics, I think he means the official athletic department, did not want Soulja Boy to be played after the Auburn game. They told the band not to play it. We were going to play it at the Sugar Bowl against Hawaii. The team wanted the band to play it, but we couldn't. Well, that's kind of interesting. So I'm assuming he was in the Redcoats, which, by the way, we love. We always have a lot of Redcoat folks, both current and former, checking out the show. There is no bigger Redcoat fan than me. I love what y'all do. Thanks for being a really fun part of the games. Even in this modern time when, so much of this conversation about the music that's played over these big booming PA systems, still a huge fan of the Redcoats. So for all of the current and former Redcoats who watch our show, I really appreciate y'all. And one of these days, I'm going to get me one of those Redcoat T-shirts they sell now. I love those things. Really cool. Wayne Taylor pointing out, and by the way, we got to go. We're super late. I was late all day on the show today too. Wayne Taylor points out that tickets for Clemson Miami are just $90. Ours are $400 plus. Yeah, I mean you could technically go to all of the conference title games added together for about the get-in price of a SEC championship ticket at the moment right now. Jimmy Barnes says, save your money for the national championship. So here's the thing about that, Jimmy, and y'all don't hold me to this. This is not binding legal advice. This is just my suggestion. A lot of times, national championships and semifinal games and bowl games, many of y'all have traveled and you know this. A lot of times, the ticket is by far and away the least expensive part of the whole trip. The airfare, the hotel, because they'll make you stay extra nights, those are all much more expensive. This year, the game is in Atlanta, so Georgia fans obviously would scarf those up. But if Georgia's playing like Oklahoma, a program that doesn't have a reputation for doing a lot of traveling, or some team like that, I mean, the national championship ticket, believe it or not, in Atlanta may actually be a little easier to get than the SEC championship ticket would be. I'm not telling you it's going to be, magnitudes cheaper, but it could be a little cheaper. And the semifinal game in either New Orleans or Pasadena may be a decent bit cheaper. So don't get scammed on buying really expensive tickets to a semifinal game until you know that's exactly what the going rate is. Chances are it's the travel that's expensive there. The tickets many times are not quite so expensive. All right. There are a gazillion comments, and I apologize for not getting through more of them, but my folks got work to do, so I got to help them do that. We'll be back at 3 p.m. Eastern time today for AT&T SEC Country Live. 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll do a fun show tomorrow. It's going to be great. I'm really excited about it because, I've been telling you all week, I'm beside myself with anticipation for 4 p.m. on Saturday. Our tailgate is going to be a great way to kick that off starting at 10 a.m. in the Blue Lot. We'll see you all for all of that, including 10 a.m. here again tomorrow morning for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live. Y'all have a good day.